Just back to the Phoenix Junior. First batch. 3 of them. I believe in the last video I glued on the fretboards and got everything prepped up to make a kind of usable neck. I've now got that. In the time since that video, I've trimmed up the sides of the fretboard because I left a slight overhang. I used a combination of small block plane Iwasaki rasps and a levelling beam to do that. You can still see the dust on the sandpaper. I think I kept it at 120 grit because it was easier. I've also used my template and I've routed the headstock shape. I've not finalised anything like my recess down here yet. I need to make a jig to do that. And I've not cut the nut slots. We've got fret slots, we've got inlays. We don't have side dots yet. Before I do anything else, I think side dots should probably be my first course of action. In my day job, I carve a lot of necks. Part of doing those necks is we do all the side dots by hand. So if I mess these up and don't get them straight, I don't have an excuse. But beyond that, we've been kind of working on batching things to make it more efficient. So if we have to carve 3 or 6 necks in a day, I think it's usually, at the moment, we're kind of working about 3 each between a couple of us. If we're doing 3 necks a day, one of us tends to get all of the necks, we'll put the inlays in, and then we'll do all of the side dots. Now they've usually only got 21 frets, which means 10 dots. These have got 24 frets, which means more dots. Yeah. So I'm hoping I've got enough pearl dots and aluminium tube. If I haven't, this is going to be quite a short video. But what normally happens, and what I've found works really well, is once you decide where your dots are going to go, so some people will put them in the middle of the fretboard. If you're using a 2mm dot, that looks quite nice. If you're using a 3mm dot, you need quite a deep fretboard, otherwise it can kind of come quite close to the edge and you risk breaking out the surface of the fretboard. I use a 3mm tube, which does look okay in a wider fretboard or a bound fretboard if you take the binding a little bit deeper, but because of the thickness of these fretboards, I'm going to do it on the join, kind of Fender style. I think Fender do their dots actually on the join, don't they? To do that, a very handy tool is the scale length ruler that Crimson makes. Not endorsed. I have made my employer buy one of these because we were measuring them all one at a time, which was nice and accurate. You got them all dead centre, but it was really time consuming. So if you're measuring in the middle of the fretboard at this point, your best bet is probably get a straight edge and reference the edge of the fretboard. Tweak your truss rod to make sure everything is perfectly level, and then you measure and mark, and then use the straight edge to mark a line, and then you'd mark where your frets are. Because I'm putting it on the join, if I've got a very slightly out of square neck at the moment from glue ups and things because I haven't adjusted it, then it's not really going to make a difference because I'm marking on a line that's already following where I want. But all I need to do is make sure I get the right scale length, which I believe on this is 24 3/4. It is. And then on this ruler, the centre of the frets that you need to mark is marked. The one downside is the 12th and the 24th are also marked in the centre. So what I've actually done on the one I use at work is I've marked out 5mm in from the edge of the 12th fret, not the 15th, 14th, that's the 12th fret. I've marked that and I've just scribed it into the metal so that I've got the reference there permanently. So I'm going to do that on this as well because it just makes sense. That's how I intend to use it. So if I mark that there, and all I have to do now is use this ruler and mark my dots on there. Then with a bradawl we give it a nice little prod, and then a brad point drill bit, drill your holes, and then you put your dots in, and all is good in the world. And I'm going to start doing that now, and once that's done I'll have to figure out the next job. I think I'm going to have to start making a template so that I can, or a jig of some sort, so I can route out my recess up here, because I need to get on with that. Otherwise it's not a 4th Avenue guitar, is it? If you've seen my guitars before, you'll know that I tend to recess an area on my headstocks here, which takes back past the veneer to the laminates underneath. Now, I have a tendency to do that by hand, and it gets a bit fiddly and it's quite time consuming. So I've decided I need a jig to do that. I actually spent a while sat kind of thinking and figuring out how I'd do it, and I realised there was actually a very simple way. If I made a negative version of the headstock that slots over the headstock, because that's all done from a template so they're the same shape, and then I had a piece on top of that with a cutout for the shape that I want, I could then use a laminate trimmer with a collar for a guide, and a ball nose cutter, which would give me a nice rounded edge, and I could then just take out the material that's left. And then I got carried away and I made the template. So we've got the headstock shape here, and this is the area that gets cut away. And then I realised that I needed to test it, so I did one of the headstocks to check that it worked, and it works quite nicely. My future plans for these guitars are to have less of the kind of wide laminates in the neck. I'm planning for the juniors to kind of be a one-piece neck with wings glued on with a veneer between to highlight. So I actually measured the middle of this recess to be where that veneer would be, rather than in the middle of the extra bits that I've got on this one. So everything on this lines up pretty much perfectly where I want it, which is quite nice. And bizarrely, first time I tried it, it works perfectly. It's not very often that that happens. So I need to do that to both of these, and then probably think about making some inlays. That could be a whole day of cutting 3 aluminium inlays. I need to teach my CNC how to make them. One day, fairly soon, probably I will do that, because that's a very long, laborious process, and I need to get that refined and sped up somewhat. But basically, to do this, all I need to do is clamp up the neck in my pattern maker's vise. This is a really nice snug fit, so it just slots onto the headstock as is, and I'm aware that this is probably just at the very edge of shot, but I will be turning the camera to zoom in as I hit it with a router and take away all the unnecessary material. So I'm going to turn you around and start making some dust. That used to take me hours. All it needs is clean. That's much easier. Whilst we're on with lots of jigs, getting to this point with the necks has meant that I'm actually at a point where I can make my standardised neck pocket template. So I've done that, and I've added it to this template here. So now if I overlay this onto the body and route out here, then the neck is chopped out in the right place, which is nice. So I think I'm going to attach this down to the bodies, and I'm going to route in the neck pocket, and then all the major routing is done, which will make life much easier. That's not a really snug fit. I can't use that to index things. But if I do them one at a time, I'll just double check that everything lines up where I want it to. Which it looks like it's going to do. I do have centre lines marked on here, which means that everything will be spot on once it's done. And then I'll attach this template down. I know that my neck pocket needs to be 25mm deep, because I've measured on here and I know how high the bridge that I'm using is. So I can go ahead and route out all these neck pockets. Pretty sure I just said that in different words. Let's just get on with it. 3 neck pockets. I've also started on the final contour because I've got my bevel here, my gut cut there, and I'm putting a small bevel in here, which, to be quite honest, fret access is pretty good. It joins at the 21st fret, so not really going to have much of an issue getting all the way up here. But just to make it easier to reach the 24th fret, there's a little bit of a cutaway going into the lower horn here. I've marked and cut it on this body, and I just need to mark and cut it on the other ones. So it's not necessary to make a template for this because it's a smooth curve that just follows round. I probably will add it into one of my templates later on, but for now all I do is take it about 5mm deeper right in the corner and bring it right to the end of the fretboard here, and then just a smooth sweep round. So I just need to get the other bodies and do that.